Today, I'll first briefly take up a topic that is development and dependency. And after that, if possible, today itself or from tomorrow, we'll start with paper 2. Now, this will have an advantage for those who are new to the class today, that once you have a background in paper 2, understanding of paper 1 would become even easier. Now, what is it that you all have to read? I had mentioned this book earlier also, and I'm repeating. Start reading, if you have not already started, David Mandelbaum's book, Society in India. David Mandelbaum, Mandelbaum, David Mandelbaum. All right. And read it slowly. The exam you have to write in 26 September. All right. So there is full year. So read it with an intention to understand. And every day when you come to the class, anything from the book you don't understand, bring it along with underlining, ask me the doubt in the class. One of the basic requirements for doing well in sociology is 3 things I'll emphasize, which I've been doing earlier also. 1, total conceptual clarity. 2, little interest in social life, social affairs. When you read newspaper, read magazine, watch television, show interest on things. If you have that minimal interest, you will be able to perform well, because you will be able to think of many examples while writing answers. And 3rd requirement is ability to write grammatically correct, simple English. That's all. Rest, everything is my responsibility. And once we have spent about a week or 10 days discussing paper 2, I would expect that you also start writing. Every day I am here in the teacher's room at 4:30. Pick up any previous year question from the topic that we have discussed in the class, write an answer and come and show it to me. Don't worry that your answer is bad, because nobody writes a perfect answer in the beginning. Everyone learns and improves. So, if I ask you, do rewrite the answer. Today only I have asked Neha to rewrite one of the answers. So, that practice will make sure there is lot of time that we are going to interact. So, once you learn how to write, then your job is done. Because finally, what you write in those 3 hours, that is going to decide your result. So, the final capability you have to learn is the ability to write grammatically simple English and relevant answers. Don't have to write too much. See, only UPSC says don't write more than 150 words when you are writing an answer. So that means they are not interested in quantity. They are interested in your ability to understand the question and to write relevantly what is demanded by the question. That is what you have to learn. All right. So, I have told Mr. Purushottam, who sits in the office room, to give you the reading list also. And I'll keep telling you what to read and where to read it from for every topic that I'm covering in the class. And the first assignment to all of you is, if even those who attended the first paper earlier, if you have not read Mandelbaum, please start reading it now. All right. Every day, 10 to 15 minutes I'll keep for only clarifying your doubts, either from the class lecture or from Mandelbaum. Now, so one topic I'm taking up today, actually this topic is from paper 1, but this is a separate topic altogether and it does not require any background in sociology. All right. The topic is development and dependency. Development and dependency. Now, what do you understand by it? What does it mean? What is this topic about? There are two words, development and dependency. So let's understand each one of them. Development. The idea of development has a long history in sociology. Initially, it referred to a gradual process of evolution of society from a simple to a complex stage, culminating in capitalist industrial society. That from a simple tribal society, how societies change gradually, leading to modern industrial society or capitalist industrial society. But later on, and one more thing, initially the idea was considered, this change was considered progress. That in this transition, we are moving from an inferior to a superior stage. But after World War II, especially when number of new nations emerged in Asia, Africa, etc., you know that decolonization after World War II. And at that time, the major concern of these new nations was to modernize. All right. Another word that was used for this was nation building. All right. Now, what does it mean, modernize? Modernize means an agrarian or pre-industrial society changing into industrial society. Agrarian or even pre-agrarian. See, some societies did not even have agriculture. They were hunting, gathering type of societies. So these pre-industrial societies changing into industrial society. This change was called modernization or development. The two words were often used interchangeably. And once again, the idea of progress came to be linked with this. Development was understood as something highly desirable because it improved the quality of life. Physical quality of life. It led to increased life expectancy, increased better health status, better, other needs fulfilled, recreation, leisure time activities. So it led to elimination of poverty and hunger, malnutrition. So therefore, it was considered something good and desirable. So development became associated with this transition. Transition means change. This change from pre-industrial to industrial society. All right. Now, within this idea of development, there were two components therefore. One, economic growth, that increased production of goods and services which will lead to improvement in the quality of life. So firstly, growth. But growth alone is not development. Growth accompanied with what is called social development. That means redistribution of the benefits of growth among the people. Redistribution of the benefits of growth. This is also called equity. Like greater gender equality, higher life expectancy, these are indices of social development. So economic growth and social development together constitute development. And for development to happen, it is essential that there must be generation of employment for all. Okay, how will you get goods and services to improve the quality of life? Unless you have money. Education के लिए भी पैसा चाहिए, health care के लिए भी पैसा चाहिए. तो your economic status should first improve. That is why they distinguish between mere growth and development. जैसे आजकल इंडिया के बारे में it was said, including it was admitted by the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, that after economic reforms तो आप समझते हैं ना, new economic policies of liberalization followed after 1990. So after economic reform, there has been growth, but that growth was not inclusive. It did not generate better employment for the masses. Only a small section. You know, it is said that our growth comes from tertiary sector, service sector. All right, IT and other activities which require a lot of educational and skills, educational background and skills. While most people are poorly educated and lack skills, so they are not getting good employment. It is not leading to improvement in the quality of life. जैसे आपको मालूम होगा, the government says for 80 crore people we are giving them free food. जो लोग खाना भी नहीं procure कर सकते अपने आप, so how can they have leisure time activity? How can they have health care? How can they have good education? All right. So this is, we did not have inclusive growth. So another name for development is inclusive growth. All right. So development is the goal of all societies. And based on this, we make a distinction between developed and underdeveloped countries. Developed countries are those where these goals have been achieved. Quality of life has improved, life expectancy is higher, gender equality is greater, women also participate in work outside home in large numbers. All right. Health status is better. Infant mortality has declined. Malnutrition is non-existent. तो उनको हम डेवलप्ड कहते हैं. Now, underdeveloped are those which are only partly successful with regard to these goals of development. All right. So you understood the idea of development. That transition to, from agrarian to industrial society, and along with that leading to improvement in the quality of life for entire population. Now, here comes the question of dependency. What is the idea of dependency? Dependent तो आप समझते हैं, तो किसी पे निर्भर होना, to depend on somebody else. So, it is said that some societies have developed, others continue to be dependent on these developed societies. All right, that means they have failed to develop. Particularly, they point out that right from the beginning, at least for last 500 years, poverty continues or persists in more or less same parts of the world. The north of hemisphere, Europe, mostly European countries, south में Australia भी included है, though that is not in north, that is in southern hemisphere, New Zealand भी है, but by and large, most of the countries in the northern hemisphere have achieved development. On the other hand, in Africa and Asia and parts of Latin America, poverty continues throughout. Why this poverty persists? It is an attempt to explain, dependency theory is an attempt to explain the persistence of poverty in more or less the same part of the world over centuries. समझ गए आप कि गरीबी कहाँ है? ऑस्ट्रेलिया में है, वो अफ्रीका में है, एशिया में है, लैटिन अमेरिका में है. तो what is the reason? This is the question people are asking, that why poverty is persisting continuously in this part of the world. So, there are various explanations for this. One explanation is an attempt to explain the continuation of poverty in some parts of the world in terms of the relation of these societies with the developed world. आप समझे इसका मतलब कि द रिलेशन बिटवीन द पुअर कंट्रीज एंड द रिच कंट्रीज, वो रिलेशनशिप इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर कंटिन्यूइंग पॉवर्टी ऑफ द पुअर कंट्रीज. You have understood now? Yes, yes. Everybody is clear about what I am trying to say? That dependency theory is an idea, is an attempt to explain continuation of poverty in terms of the relations between poor and rich countries. Poor countries are called underdeveloped countries, rich countries are called developed countries. इनका जो relation है ना, that is unequal relationship. Dependency में क्या होता है? कोई dominate करता है, कोई subordinate होता है ना? वही तो dependency होती है. बच्चा dependent है parents पे, बच्चे के capabilities नहीं है. पेरेंट्स कंट्रोल और डोमिनेट करते हैं बच्चे को. बच्चा अपनी मर्जी नहीं कर सकता, बच्चा वही करता है जो पेरेंट्स डिमांड करते हैं. तो बच्चा, बिकॉज ही इज डिपेंडेंट. सो डिपेंडेंसी कन्वेज द आइडिया ऑफ इनइक्वालिटी, दैट द रिलेशंस बिटवीन रिच एंड पुअर कंट्रीज आर रिलेशंस ऑफ इनइक्वालिटी, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दिस अनइक्वल रिलेशन पॉवर्टी कंटिन्यूज. This is the idea of dependency. Has everyone understood this point? All right. Now I'll trace the development of dependency theory. Early beginning was made in 1950s, 60s. Second World War के बाद जैसे ही countries became independent and they tried to rebuild, modernize their nation, develop their nation, they encountered a lot of problems. Then people started thinking. So, it begins with the work of a Latin American scholar, Raul Prebisch. Raul Prebisch. He was basically an economist. So he said, on the basis of his observation of Latin American countries, he said what is happening is that Latin American countries are exporting primary products. इसका क्या मतलब हुआ? प्राइमरी, सेकेंडरी और टर्शरी सेक्टर जानते हैं ना? एग्रीकल्चर, माइनिंग, ये प्राइमरी सेक्टर है. इंडस्ट्रियल एक्टिविटी टर्शरी सेक्टर है. सेकेंडरी सेक्टर है. टर्शरी इज सर्विस सेक्टर, एजुकेशन, हेल्थ केयर, trade, banking, insurance, all this falls in the hospitality. This is tertiary sector. So, Latin American countries were primary producers. कोई coffee बनाता था, कोई sugar, like that. And that is what they exported. Because they did not have industries. So, they exported these primary products to the rich countries, and in return they purchased manufactured goods from the rich countries. Now, rich countries ensured that the price of the primary product remained very low, and the manufactured things which they exported in return for import of primary products, they were priced high. So they had a fundamental BOP problem, balance of payment problem. वो कितना भी एक्सपोर्ट कर ले, जो इंपोर्ट से उनके लिए बहुत एक्सपेंसिव होते थे. So they were net losers. And so they were not able to grow. ऑलराइट, तो उसने कहा why not stop this export and why not industrialize yourself? Actually, India followed this path. After independence, we adopted, अगर आपने जनरल स्टडीज में भी पढ़ाओ प्लानिंग के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, we adopted import substitution model of growth. सुना है ये कि we will try to produce as much as possible internally. तभी पहले import of cars, import of electronic items, that was all banned because they said we should develop our own industries first. All right. So Prabis suggested this idea of import substitution. कि उनसे इंपोर्ट मत करो, वो महंगा दे रहे हैं, लूट रहे हैं तुमको, उनसे मत लो. Now, but it didn't work. It was too simple a solution. Now, why did it not work? There were a number of factors. One, when you have studied economics in general studies, have you come across the term economies of scale? If manufacture is organized on a large scale, then it becomes cheaper to produce items. जैसे एक फैक्ट्री है, Tata makes cars, Tata Motors. Tata should also own the iron ore mines. Tata should also have electric generation power plant, all owned by Tata. So Tata will not have to pay for the profit of these people. They will save the profit. All right. So Tata, if they are organizing production on a large scale, the cost of each item would be less. सस्ता पड़ेगा उनको. It is called economies of scale. Rich countries had economies of scale. Now these poor countries, many of them are very small, और उनमें purchasing power भी लोगों की बहुत कम है. They are very poor people. So they would not be able to achieve the economies of scale. So production would be very inefficient there. One. Secondly, poor people did not even have control over all their resources, because multinational corporations often control them. जैसे इंडिया में भी माइंस जो हैं, mining is going on heavily in Chhattisgarh, Odisha and Jharkhand and all these areas. So many of these mining companies are multinationals. So they control the resources. Now, if you want to acquire that control yourself, they will not allow you to do it. I'll give you one important example. You heard of a country called Chile. It is in Latin America. Chile has a lot of minerals, including copper ore. Now, all the copper mines are controlled by American MNCs. And they are buying copper ore at a very low price. So, when a new president was elected, his name was Salvador Allende. When he was elected, he said, I'll nationalize these mines. That means government will take over the control of these mines. Now, the multinationals didn't agree to that. They influenced American government. CIA engineered a revolt against Allende, though he was the elected president. Army general captured power by force with the help of army, killed Allende, and allowed the copper mines to be owned by multinationals. That's how these MNCs, even attack on Iraq, American attack on Iraq was primary. They said, we want to prevent them from making weapons of mass destruction, atom bomb, etc., but nuclear bomb. But actually, they wanted to ensure that oil wells in the region remain under the control of American MNCs. So, poor countries do not even have a control over their own resources. So they said it can't. That suggestion of Prebisch didn't work. And then it led to number of serious attempts to think of what to do. And why poverty continues in more or less the same areas over centuries. All right. And the connection with the developed countries is not helping the poor countries. Economic theory says that if you are connected with the rich countries, it will be mutually beneficial for both. But actually it was not working out like that. It was not beneficial for the poor. This was the major issue in the background on which, related to which dependency theory is developed. So, dependency theory focuses primarily on external relations. गरीब लोग, गरीब देश गरीब इसलिए हैं क्योंकि उनका अनइक्वल रिलेशन है अमीर देश के साथ. Poor countries are poor because of their unequal exploitative relation with the rich countries. So, you can write down the definition of dependency. This definition is given by a sociologist, E. Dos Santos. So he says dependency is an historical condition. Dependency is an historical condition which shapes the structure of world economy. Which shapes the structure of world economy such that it favors some countries to the detriment of others. And limits the development possibilities of the subordinate countries. The economy, subordinate countries, full stop. The economy of the subordinate countries is conditioned by the development and expansion of developed economy. अब आप इसको पढ़िएगा and tell me if you understand. Yes, you understood? Anyway, I'll explain. He is saying development is a historical condition. That means it is something which has evolved, developed over centuries. And it is a condition in which shapes the structure of world economy. Global world economy hai, that is structured in such a way that it favors the rich countries and harms the poor countries. वो कहता है ना detriment, detriment means नुकसान पहुंचाना. It harms the poor. तो कुछ लोगों का फायदा होता है, कुछ लोगों का नुकसान ही होता है. That is how it is an unequal relation. Equal हो तो सबका फायदा होना चाहिए. Win-win situation. Now, और जो poor countries हैं, it limits the development possibilities of subordinate countries. जो poor dependent countries हैं, उनके development के chances भी limit हो जाते हैं. They cannot grow beyond a certain level. वो वहीं stuck up हो जाते हैं. So, their economy, what happens in the economy of the poor countries is shaped by the growth of rich countries. उनका जो फायदा हो रहा है, that is controlling the economy of the poor country. This is what is the meaning of dependence. Now, although there are many differences among scholars who have subscribed to the idea of dependency, but I'll focus on the common element in all the works of the scholars who have emphasized on dependency. One, वो कहते हैं that the world is divided into two parts. Developed and underdeveloped. Then they use some other, different scholars have used different words. Another term used is developed, underdeveloped, or metropolitan. Developed are also called metropolitan, and underdeveloped are called satellite, or center and periphery. Center and periphery. Like that. So different scholars have used different terms, but this idea is common. They say there are two parts of the world. This is one and this is another. Then next, mostly the underdeveloped satellite or periphery are located in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And developed metropolitan countries are located in Europe, Australia, etc. America, North America, Canada. Now, as I already mentioned, the focus of dependency theory is on external relations. That they focus on external relations. That external relations are primarily responsible for their poverty. What are these external forces? Like multinational corporations. Multinational corporations come to these countries, exploit their cheap labor, all right, to produce goods which they export elsewhere. Just as Suzuki, they've taken over Maruti factories. They make cars. Why do they make cars in India? Because labor is very cheap in India. If they were to make it in Japan or in America, labor would be very expensive. You must have read that with globalization there is massive outsourcing of production. इसको global value chains कहते हैं. That the headquarters are in America, production takes place in China, in Indonesia, in India, and then it is exported to Europe. All right. So, multinational corporations and all the profits are flowed back into the rich countries. Then, foreign aid. When countries give aid to the poor, that is also exploitative. I'll give you a very simple example. In most of the homes, when a housewife gives a gift or something extra to the maid servant, she gives dresses. All right. Which dresses? The dresses she has been wearing for long and is now sick of it, wants to get rid of it. तो थोड़ा सा फायदा ले लो, थोड़ा गुडविल बना लो, वो maid servant को दे दो. So when they give us technology in foreign aid, it is often the technology which has been rejected in advanced countries. One. हालांकि ये अब चेंज हो रहा है, even state of art technology is coming, or when they give an aid comes with strings. ऐसा कहा जाता है, there is no free dinner in this world. मुफ्त में कुछ नहीं मिलता. तो जब वो aid देते हैं, they get a control over our policy. They dictate कि what should be the policy our government should follow. All right. And the policy is such that it is beneficial to them. Then they say that this relation between developed and underdeveloped countries is a dynamic one. Because over time, it continues to reinforce inequality. Now, they say it is global capitalism which is responsible for this. आप कैपिटलिज्म का मतलब समझते हैं? What is capitalism? सुना तो होगा capitalism. Capitalism is a system of production where the basic purpose or motive is generate profits. तो हर काम को इस हिसाब से किया जाता है कि आपको प्रॉफिट मिले. Alright. So what we have today in the world is a capitalist system. Now, capitalism has created an international division of labor. And it is this division of labor is responsible for underdevelopment of the poor countries. An example I told you, Prabish had pointed out earlier, that poor countries supply cheap raw materials and agricultural products. And they also are a market for costly manufactured goods from the rich countries. And thirdly, rich countries exploit the cheap labor of the poor countries. They make investment also in the poor countries, but in such a way that it benefits the rich countries. Now, then we identify some of the basic propositions of dependency theory. Certain propositions which are commonly accepted by all dependency theories. One, they make a distinction between underdevelopment and undevelopment. Underdevelopment and undevelopment. All right. Now, let me give you the background that one of the theories of development says that the poor countries are poor because they belong to an earlier stage of the rich countries. All right. They talk about stages of economic development. There is a scholar called Rostow, R-O-S-T-O-W. He talked about stages of economic growth. तो वो कहता है कि गरीब लोग लेट कमर हैं, उन्होंने डेवलपमेंट बाद में शुरू की है, तो दे बिलोंग टू एन अर्लियर स्टेज. मतलब अगर यूरोप एडल्ट है तो एशिया उनका बचपन है, अर्लियर स्टेज. पहले यूरोप भी ऐसा ही था, अब यूरोप तो आगे निकल गया, हम लोग लेट कमर से हम अभी वहीं फंसे हुए हैं. तो if we maintain contact with the rich countries, we will also able to catch up. हम भी डेवलप कर जाएंगे, गरीब लोग भी डेवलप कर जाएंगे. That is what Rostov model says in simple words. डिपेंडेंसी थियोरी इसको रिजेक्ट करता है. समझे? तो इस बैकग्राउंड में we'll come back to the point, underdevelopment and undevelopment. They say that the developed countries or rich countries of today were never underdeveloped. They were undeveloped. Undevelopment में क्या होता है? That they had resources, but those resources were not being exploited, not being used for production. जैसे अमेरिका में क्या था? America had a small population of red Indians, है ना? अब रेड इंडियंस के बाद कोई टेक्नोलॉजी वगैरह नहीं थी. They could not use the enormous mineral and other resources and the land for cultivation and all that, so they could not generate wealth. तो अमेरिका के रिसोर्स एक्सप्लॉइट नहीं हुए थे, हार्नेस नहीं हुए थे, they were not used, so it was undeveloped. यूरोप भी पहले अनडेवलप्ड था. On the other hand, Asian countries and African countries are underdeveloped. Underdeveloped is a situation in which resources are used in a manner that it benefits the rich countries and harms the poor countries. जैसे इंडिया में, India, when there was British rule, there was massive exploitation of resources. हम कॉटन सप्लाई करते थे और बहुत सारी चीजें सप्लाई करते थे, मिनरल्स जो है वो सप्लाई करते थे, एंड वी ऑल्सो फंडेड देयर ट्रेड, जो मैसिव रेवेन्यू कलेक्शन होती थी. All right, that is what Dadabhai Naoroji called the drain of wealth. So, as a result of this exploitation of resources, India remained backward, England became rich. So, developing countries के resources use हो रहे हैं, they are being extracted and used, but to the advantage of the rich. That is what is underdeveloped. अनडेवलपमेंट में तो रिसोर्सेज हैं पर वो यूज नहीं हो रहे हैं, वो तो आगे कभी भी आप यूज कर सकते हो. इसीलिए दे से दैट द पुअर कंट्रीज डू नॉट रिप्रेजेंट द पास्ट ऑफ रिच कंट्रीज, बिकॉज रिच कंट्रीज वर नेवर द कॉलोनीज ऑफ एनीबडी. यूरोप वॉज नॉट अ कॉलोनी ऑफ एनी अदर कंट्री. India was, Africa was a colony, and they were, resources were exploited from it. So they are not the past. Rich countries were undeveloped, but never underdeveloped. And therefore, it is wrong to say that they will just catch up over time if only they come into contact with the West. अगर वो developed countries के contact में आएंगे, they'll get the technology, they'll get new value system, work ethics, all right, and they'll get capital. तो उससे वो भी develop हो जाएंगे. जैसा कि वो कहते हैं, देखो जो एरिया वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज के कांटेक्ट में आ रहे हैं वो डेवलप हो जा रहे हैं. बॉम्बे इज सो डेवलप बिकॉज इट इज इन कांटेक्ट विद वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज, बट छत्तीसगढ़ या जो है झारखंड डेवलप नहीं है. ये लोग कहते हैं झारखंड वाज एज मच इन कांटेक्ट विद द ब्रिटिश एज मुंबई इज. सारे मिनरल्स तो वहां से लेके एक्सपोर्ट होते थे. So they were being robbed. So by coming into contact with the West, it doesn't mean that they will develop. All right? Because the relationship is unequal, exploitative. The developed countries and their capitalist enterprises will extract profits from them and abandon them. Then, so because they are forced to enter into relation with the rich countries, that is why the poor countries remain poor. Then the dependency theory identifies with something called national interest. National interest means interest of the majority of poor people. That's how they define national interest. So they say that relation with rich countries or developed countries is not in the national interest. Why? It does not benefit the poor. Poor are the vast majority. That is what I was telling you about growth, that it was not inclusive growth. अभी क्या होता है, multinational आती है, they find that there is, say, aluminium ore or copper ore or something, they start, digging out that ore, mining it. So people, agriculturists, tribals living in those areas, they are pushed out. उनको थोड़ा compensation देके भगा देते हैं. And those poor people, they don't have entrepreneurial skill. वो जो थोड़ा पैसा मिलता है उससे वो business भी नहीं start कर पाते. उनको कोई skills नहीं है, तो वो पैसा खत्म हो जाता है. बाद में they are left in acute poverty. All right. अभी इसी बात पे वो नंदीग्राम एजिटेशन हुआ था, आपको मालूम है नंदीग्राम? नहीं, नॉट. Mamata Banerjee came to power because of that. All right, that massive displacement of the poor by industrialists, either Indian or multinational corporation. There was Kalinga Nagar agitation. I don't know whether you have read about it. In Odisha, वहाँ पे पॉक्सो, POSCO, not POXO तो वो लॉ है, POSCO, South Korean multinational wanted to, they acquired land. तभी there was also agitation against the BJP government because they diluted that land acquisition act. So poor people were displaced and the land was taken over for mining by a multinational company. So this is how they say that these relations work against the national interests of the poor countries. और national interest क्या है? Interest of the majority of poor. That's what they argue. All right. And then they also point out that there is a dependency model within the poor countries also. That many of our economists who are instrumental in framing the policies, they are trained in Western countries. They have worked in World Bank and IMF. And IMF and World Bank are controlled by America and other rich countries. So when they come to occupy important positions here, they make policies which favor them. So hamesha it is not by force that rich countries are exploiting us. They are doing it with consent because the elite, people at the top, within the poor countries, their thinking matches with the interests of the rich countries. All right. So they voluntarily, we are entering into that relationship with the rich countries, which is against the interests of the poor. It's a voluntary relationship. Because the very thinking of the elite is shaped by, even knowledge is shaped in such a way, social science knowledge is shaped by the interests of the rich countries. So the very thinking of the elite in the poor countries serves the interests of the rich countries. Like Montek Singh Ahluwalia was earlier a World Bank employee. So his entire thinking is shaped to adopt policies which serve the interests of the rich countries. Now, so therefore, what is the conclusion? They say that the developed countries of the Western world do not serve as a model for poor countries. They say that rich countries, Europe became rich, America became rich by colonial exploitation. अब हमारे को तो कोई कॉलोनी बनने को तैयार नहीं है, अब कहाँ रह गई कॉलोनी इंडिया के लिए, तो इंडिया कहाँ से एक्सप्लॉइट करेगा? So we cannot follow their model because they had so many colonies where they extracted wealth. Now, even they attack liberalization. All right. Liberalization leads to economic growth. True. This has happened in India also. After economic reforms, Indian economy, India is today among the fastest growing economies in the world. Okay. That's true. But the benefits of this growth do not trickle down. Trickling down, समझते हैं? धीरे धीरे जब एक जग भर जाता है, तो once it is brimful, then it starts trickling down, नीचे गिरने लगेगा. तो अमीर जब खूब अमीर हो जाएंगे, उसके बाद उनकी जो इनकम है वो गरीबों तक भी पहुंचेगी और गरीब भी पॉवर्टी से बाहर निकल जाएंगे. दे विल ऑल्सो डेवलप. दिस इज द लॉजिक ऑफ liberalization, that we need growth and growth will lead to trickle down. वो कहते हैं ट्रिकल डाउन हो ही नहीं रहा है, ग्रोथ हो रही है मगर ट्रिकल डाउन नहीं हो रहा है. Trickle down तब होगा when people have high skills and they are able to seek employment in the new economic opportunities that come. अब जहाँ education ही नहीं है, most people are poorly skilled, they have a poor health status, there is gender bias, there are other forms of deprivation, तो वो trickle down हो ही नहीं रहा. भाई जियो की जियो हॉटस्टार एक्सपेंड होगी तो लोगों को नौकरी मिलेगी, पर किन को नौकरी मिलती है? those who are highly educated. At least 12 years of schooling. India में 12 years of schooling is not more than 10-12%. उनके पास स्किल ही नहीं है. आईटी सेक्टर में नौकरी किसको मिलेगी? Who had done at least 12 years and then done courses in programming, computer programming. बाकी लोगों को कुछ नहीं मिलेगा. That is why we have such a huge informal sector. मैंने उस दिन बताया था ना आपको, informal sector, more than 90% of Indian labor is in the informal sector. वहां उनको skill ही नहीं है. So growth is not leading to trickle down. Then, and that is why they don't regard growth as the true indicator of progress. Rather, they pay attention to social development. जैसे मैंने अभी बताया था ना, life expectancy, mass education, decline in infant mortality, elimination of malnutrition. जब ये सब होगा तब हम कहेंगे कि डेवलपमेंट हो रही है. सिर्फ ग्रोथ से नहीं कह सकते, बिकॉज द ट्रिकल डाउन नहीं हो रहा है. एंड सम ऑफ दीज थियरिस्ट, they regard China as a successful example. What did China do? China was also a backward, poor country. In 1949, there was a revolution. After that, China closed itself to the world, de-linked, सबसे खत्म किया. And firstly, they focused on creating basic equality for all. मैंने आपको बताया था ना, I gave you the example of Mao being the greatest fashion designer on earth. To create equality, he made a rule. Everyone will have a bicycle, but no one will have a car. Everyone will wear same clothes made up of same cloth and same design, जिसको माओ सूट कहते थे. First created equality. All right, focused on education for everyone. Focused on health. He introduced a new policy, जिसको India also later on tried to follow imperfectly. He introduced the concept of barefoot doctors. He knew China was at that time the most populous country and a poor country. He said, we can't afford high-tech hospitals like Apollo for everyone. तो क्या करो? Ordinary poor people, make them doctors by giving them basic knowledge of preventive medicine. देखो दो तरीके की मेडिकल इंटरवेंशन होती है, प्रिवेंटिव एंड क्यूरेटिव. क्यूरेटिव तो जब बीमारी हो गई तो आप हॉस्पिटल जाके इलाज कराते हैं, और प्रिवेंटिव इज यू टेक स्टेप्स कि बीमारियां हो ही ना. All right, give that minimal knowledge to ordinary peasants. This was the idea of barefoot doctors. हमने भी India tried to adopt that idea later on, much later, in the form of primary health centers in every village. But we did not do it as efficiently as China did it, except Kerala. In Kerala, they were eminently successful. So, first they created a situation, and then they opened the economy. They also went for massive rural industrialization. And the result is, today, China is challenging America. It is emerging as a new world power. Much bigger economy than India, and very powerful. Trump could not impose high tariffs on China. They made it 50% on us. China is also buying cheap oil from Russia, but he didn't do that for China. All right. So they see this as a successful model where they avoided being dependent. Now, this is the general characteristic of dependency theory. Tell me if there is anything you have not understood, any doubt or anything you have not understood. Yeah, that capital comes from one place, manufacturing takes place in another place, market is in the third place, all right. जहाँ पे cheap labor available है, you do the manufacturing done there. All the Nike shoes, Nike is an American company, Nike shoes are made in China and sold in Japan or Australia or other parts of the world. Suzuki, a Japanese company, cars are made in India because cheap labor is available here. And market is Europe. So this is international division of labor. They talk about, dependency theorists talk about the idea of national interest. And how do they define national interest? They say national interest means those things which are in the interest of majority of the poor people. These countries are called poor countries because majority of population is poor. And what is in the interest of these poor is the national interest. Huh? डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज में तो मास पॉवर्टी है ही नहीं, दे हैव इरेडिकेटेड पॉवर्टी. मैंने कल आपको बताया था ना वो कि बेसिक इशू ऑफ अर्निंग द ब्रेड इज नॉट देयर. अगर आप कुछ भी नहीं करेंगे, स्वीडन में आपको इतने अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट अलाउंस मिलेंगे कि यू कैन लीड अ कंफर्टेबल लाइफ इवन विदाउट वर्किंग. सो दे हैव इनइक्वालिटी, मैं ये नहीं डिनाई नहीं कर रहा हूं, they have, but it is not that kind of inequality where basic needs are denied for population. Economic growth is necessary but not sufficient. अगर ग्रोथ नहीं होगी तो कुछ भी नहीं होगा खाने के लिए, क्या बांटोगे आप, है ना. फर्स्ट द केक शुड बी देयर, देन यू डिवाइड एंड डिस्ट्रीब्यूट इट. तो ग्रोथ तो होनी ही चाहिए, बट ये नहीं है कि ग्रोथ हो गई तो काम बन गया. वो देखो इंडिया में ग्रोथ तो हो रही है, बट मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन कांट अफोर्ड 2 स्क्वायर मील्स अ डे. आपको इतना मुफ्त का खाना क्यों देना पड़ रहा है? एंड government's own admission, 80 crore people are like that. Out of 140 crore, 80 crore people can't get 2 square meals a day. आपको मनरेगा क्यों चलानी पड़ रही है? Because jobs are not there in the village. All right. Now, I'll briefly talk about two dependency theories which are most popular. ऐसे तो बहुत लोग हैं. One is Wallerstein, Immanuel Wallerstein, IMMANUEL. Immanuel Wallerstein. And the second one is A.G. Frank, Andre Gunder Frank. All right. Now, Wallerstein has developed a theory which is called world system theory. Or world system analysis. All right. Now, although there are some extreme statements in what he says that we will look at when we criticize him. First, let us see what he says very briefly. So, he says, throughout human history, there has been three kinds of society. One, mini systems. Mini systems. Second, single state world empire. And third, multi-polity world economy. What do they mean? Mini system means small isolated tribal societies that have always existed. Isolated village communities like in India before independence. Then, second is single state world empire like Roman Empire. All right. Then today, present day society he calls as multi-polity world economy. All right. तो वर्ल्ड एम्पायर्स जो थी उसमें तो एक सेंटर होता था, जैसे रोम वाज द सेंटर एंड देयर वर लार्ज नंबर ऑफ कम्युनिटीज विच वर गवर्न्ड बाय रोम. ऑटोमन एम्पायर थी ऐसी. ऑलराइट. नाउ टुडे he says we have a world economy. The whole world constitutes a single economy. हालांकि गवर्नमेंट अलग अलग है, मल्टी पॉलिटी. पॉलिटी मीन्स गवर्नमेंट. So what we have today are multi-polity world economy. And therefore, he rejects the idea of third world. He says there is no third world. There is only one world. You know third world? Poor countries are called third world. He says they are not separate worlds. There is only one world. They are part of the international division of labor. So this is the world system today. Now, this integration of different societies into world system happened because of capitalism, which started around 16th century. Capitalism started developing, and by 19th century, this integration was complete. Capitalist countries started ruling the entire globe. Colonization हो गया. All right. And as a result of that, we are now having one world system. Then he says this world system is divided into three parts. There are three parts. Core, semi-periphery and periphery. And semi-periphery has a dual character. कैसे? It is periphery to the core, but it is core to the periphery. For the core, it is a part of periphery, but for the periphery, it is a part of the core. It's like Indians settled in America. So for America, they are Indians, and for Indians, they are Americans. They have a dual character. Now, what are the characteristics of the core? One, core has access to large quantity of raw materials coming from the periphery. Then they have access to cheap labor of the periphery and semi-periphery. Then they make huge profits from direct investment, जिसको इंडिया में हम FDI कहते हैं ना. For us that is FDI, for America that is DI, direct investment. And they have a huge market for exports. And they have highly skilled professional labor. A large part of that is imported from periphery. जैसे इंडियंस जाके अमेरिका में H1B वीजा लेकर के सेटल हो जाते हैं. अमेरिका गेट्स अ गुड इंजीनियर विदाउट स्पेंडिंग एनी मनी. इंडिया में हम सब्सिडाइज करते हैं, गवर्नमेंट पैसा देती है. यू नो, इन हायर एजुकेशन टिल रिसेंटली वाज सो चीप इन इंडिया. इंडिया ट्रेन करती है उनको, और इंजीनियर बनने के बाद वो माइग्रेट कर जाते हैं. America gets a ready-made skilled doctor, engineer or other professional without spending a penny on it. This is what we call brain drain. Then they are economically and militarily highly powerful. And they specialize in IT, finance, and other service industries. They are in the forefront of new technologies and new industries, biotechnology, information technology, all the new technologies. And they have a very strong state institutions. The governmental system, the state machinery is very efficient. And they have enormous resources to influence other countries in various ways. So therefore, they have productivity dominance, trade dominance, and financial dominance, and military dominance. All right, these are the characteristics of the core. Then periphery. They have underdeveloped economy, limited industrialization, they are often targets of investment by multinational corporations to exploit their cheap labor. Most part of the labor is unskilled. Most part of the population is poor and uneducated and unskilled. Unskilled means lacking in advanced skills. They have a small upper class that controls most of the wealth and income. See that Oxfam says that top 1% in India controls 50% of the wealth. This is Oxfam report. And they are forced to follow economic policies that favor core nations and harm the long-term interests of their own nation. The governmental institutions are not very efficient. And semi-periphery consists of nations which have both the characteristics. Some population is more like periphery, some population is more like core. You have Tata Sons, which has acquired many foreign brands of car manufacturing, Range Rover and that Jaguar and all those cars are now manufactured by Tatas. Tata is an MNC. Reliance is an MNC. All right. So They have both the characteristics. And he says this is a dynamic process. That means the countries which were the core at one time may not remain core all the time. Like Spain and Portugal were the first countries to emerge as core. Entire Latin America was colonized by Spain and Portugal. Even in India, the Portugal were the first to come and colonize Goa. All right. Then later on, Dutch, Holland emerged as another core. While Spain and Portugal declined because the cost of maintaining the colonies became so high. So Holland or Netherlands, they colonized Southeast Asia. Then competition developed among the core. French and English started competing with the Dutch, and finally England became the most successful, followed by French. In Africa and Vietnam, etc., were French colonies. So this is how core has a dynamic characteristic. Today, Spain and Portugal are like semi-periphery. They are no more core. America emerged as a core, especially after World War I and more importantly after World War II. World War II led to collapse of Britain. Sari colonies bhi chale gaye and the entire wealth was wasted in fighting the war. So Britain, UK has become an ordinary developed country. Or you can say the most developed of the developing countries. आजकल कौन पूछता है ब्रिटेन को? See, at one time when Prince of Wales visited India, we constructed the gateway of India and Bombay to welcome the prince. Or abhi, few years back, when Queen Elizabeth was alive, she came to India. She was asked to inaugurate a flyover by the roadside. And Prakash Singh Badal said, ask her to apologize for Jallianwala Bagh. The poor thing remained quiet. And चुप कैसे चली गई? अब आज ब्रिटेन को कौन पूछ रहा है? So they are no more the core. At one time they were the most powerful country in the world. Now America is a core or hegemon in decline. अब China emerge हो रहा है next core. America as a core, its control is, its dominance is falling. तभी तो वो ट्रम्प ये शोर मचा रहा है टैरिफ वैरिफ का. Because the world, the terms of trade are adverse for America. There is deindustrialization in America. Labor cost became so high. सब कैपिटलिस्ट किसी के सगे नहीं होते, उनके लिए कोई नेशनलिज्म नहीं है, वो प्रॉफिट से ही वेडिड है. जहां प्रॉफिट मिलेगा वहां जाएंगे. तो इंस्टेड ऑफ locating their factories in America, they are now outsourcing it in Asia and other parts, India, China, Southeast Asia. So वहाँ deindustrialization हो रहा है. Unemployment is growing. So it's a core on the downslide. And China is emerging as the next core. So what he wants to say is it's a dynamic process. ऐसे ही what was periphery yesterday may enter semi-periphery. Now, this theory has been criticized. Certain things that he claimed are factually found to be incorrect. And overemphasis on external relations is not accepted. After all, look at the case of South Korea. South Korea was among the poorest countries. So was Malaysia in 1950s. So was China. In fact, India was more developed than all the three in 50s. Today, South Korea is about to enter the core. All right? And Malaysia is closely following it. Malaysia is a developed country now. China, we have already seen. So, don't you think internal policies also matter? ठीक है, external factors may contribute, but that's just one of the factors. Internal factors are very crucial. And not only economic factors, political and cultural factors also matter. To say that it is the exploitation which is keeping them poor. China का तो मान लिया, China de-linked. But South Korea did not even de-link. They linked fully with the world economy. जबकि India continued with import substitution model, South Korea adopted export-led growth model. फर्क समझते हैं हम? Import substitution में तो हमने क्या किया? ना तो हम बाहर से ज्यादा खरीदेंगे और ना बाहर बेचेंगे. पहले अपनी इंडस्ट्रीज को डेवलप करेंगे. तभी इंडिया में सिर्फ 2 कार होती थी, फिएट एंड एम्बेसडर, और ज्यादा कार ही नहीं बनाते थे, और बाहर से कार लाना प्रोहिबिटेड था. बट वी चेंज ओनली इन 90s, जबकि हमारी मजबूरी थी. बीओपी क्राइसिस हुई, दैट यू आर फेमिलियर विद, नो? इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स कैसे आए. बट Southeast Asian countries, they opened up in early 70s and they took to massive exports, competitive, made their own industry competitive. हमने तो प्रोटेक्ट किया इंडस्ट्री को कि हमारी इंडस्ट्री will not be able to compete with developed countries, तो डेवलप नहीं हो पाएगी, उनकी इंडस्ट्री ज्यादा एफिशिएंट है. लेकिन उन्होंने उसको एक्सपोज किया. And they entered export market with a vengeance. Today, Taiwan, it is quite developed. Singapore, of course, is a baby, small city only. तभी इनको कहते हैं एशियन टाइगर्स एंड कब. कब समझते हैं? टाइगर के बच्चे को कब कहते हैं. तो टाइगर्स हैं ताइवान, साउथ कोरिया, मलेशिया. These are called Taiwan. And now Vietnam is emerging as a major tiger. So, internal policies matter. Cultural values also matter. So not only external relations. And in today's world, the idea of isolating, delinking does not make sense in the globalized world. And it is the failure of the national governments that they have not invested enough in education, healthcare, skill development, and so on. That is a very important factor. Then we come to another, dependency theory, that is A.G. Frank, Andre Gunder Frank's theory. His ideas are presented in an article which he called Development of Underdevelopment. Development of underdevelopment. He says it is incorrect to say that underdeveloped countries of today resemble the past of developed countries. I made this point already when I was discussing general features of dependency theory. Because he says the developed countries were never underdeveloped, though they had been undeveloped. And he says the underdeveloped countries, their problems cannot be explained purely in terms of internal factors, economic, political or cultural. So, underdevelopment is the result of metropolitan satellite relations. Wallerstein ने core periphery की बात की, he conveys the same idea in terms of metropolitan satellite. And he says these relations are essential part of the world capitalist system. Then he rejects what is called dual society and economy thesis. इसका क्या मतलब हुआ? Dual माने दो. So the dual economy and society says there are two parts of society, which is developed and this is underdeveloped. It is developed because it came into contact with metropolitan. जैसे मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दिया ना, मुंबई एंड झारखंड या छत्तीसगढ़. All right. So it is developed because it came into contact with metropolitan countries. It is underdeveloped because it remained isolated. He shows by citing historical evidence from Latin America. Most of his research was in Latin America. That the parts which are called underdeveloped, they are not isolated. They have been intensely connected with metropolitan countries. And when they lost their importance for world capital, they were abandoned in a backward, underdeveloped state. Then he says, next, metropolis satellite relations are not limited to international level. But penetrate the very economic, political and social life of Latin American countries. All right. So he says there is a chain of metropolis satellite relation. कैसे? जैसे अमेरिका, US. It is a world metropolis. All right. There is a Latin American country. Within Latin American countries, say Brazil or Argentina Brazil has Sao Paulo, a highly industrialized area. So, say this is the developed part of Brazil. That is the satellite of world metropolis. All right. Now, this part has its own satellites in regional capitals. All right. Most of them are colonial cities. They were centers of colonial power, and that is why they developed. So, they are satellites of national metropolis. National metropolis is a satellite of world metropolis. And then they have their smaller satellites around them in the hinterland, whom they exploit. So they exploit these people, and these regional centers are exploited by the national metropolis, and national metropolis is exploited by the world metropolis. Like this, there is a chain of metropolis satellite relations. Now, he says that the underdeveloped countries experience their highest development when their contact with the world metropolis was at the weakest. And what do? This relation? They extract profits, capital from the satellites. Every metropolis extracts the capital from the satellites. So when these connections are severed, that is the time the underdeveloped countries experience highest growth. And if the relations continue, then the satellites will not be able to develop beyond a point. Their growth would be stunted, limited because of this unequal relationship. He cites the example of Japan, because Japan was never satellized. Japan was never the satellite of any country. And that was the reason Japan could develop so fast. Even though it had no minerals. Japanese do not have any minerals. They were dependent on agriculture. And still, because they were not satellized, they developed so fast. So the best chances of development, according to him, lies in the fact that these unequal relations ties are snapped. Now, he has also been criticized that today in the globalized world, he is talking about delinking and isolating themselves. Now you have digital economy, all right, new areas are emerging. Can any country afford to isolate itself? what China did in 50s cannot be done today, 75 years later. And again, he has also been criticized for overemphasis on external factors and purely economic factors. So totally ignores the national level social, cultural and political factors. And as I told you, how does one explain the success of Southeast Asia? They were satellised also. Vietnam was a colony, Korea was a colony, they were satellised and they were poor and they did not deal and yet they developed. How can one explain that? So national policies do matter a lot. There is an overemphasis on external factors. At best, external factors can be treated as one of the factors. So today, in the globalization period, isolation is unthinkable. So this is about development and dependency. Now, if there are any questions, anything you have not understood, please tell me. When that contact was weakest. Yeah, he cites examples. I'll give you examples. He says, that if we look at the history of economic growth in Latin America, the temporary isolation caused by crisis of war or depression in the world metropolis. For example, 17th century, Napoleonic Wars, First World War, Depression of 1930s, Second World War. This was the time that Argentina, Brazil and Chile witnessed rapid growth. Because this was the time European powers were preoccupied with their internal problems and their control weakened. And the second argument, he says, where satellization was not there, Japan, it developed so well. Because Japan was nobody's satellite. Essence of metropolitan satellite is extraction of surplus profits from the satellite to the metropolis. And it's a chain. इन छोटे पॉकेट से सरप्लस यहाँ आता है, प्रॉफिट यहाँ आते हैं, यहाँ से फिर नेशनल मेट्रोपोलिस में जाते हैं, विच इज द सैटेलाइट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड मेट्रोपोलिस, यहाँ से प्रॉफिट्स वर्ल्ड मेट्रोपोलिस में जाते हैं. He even says कि अगर if there is an artificial substitute for coffee, Brazil economy would collapse. Brazil is a major exporter of coffee. All right, तो अगर उसका सिंथेटिक, ये तो नेचुरल सोर्स से आती है, अगर सिंथेटिक सब्स्टिट्यूट मिल गया, ब्राजील इकोनॉमी वुड कोलैप्स. primarily focuses on external factors. क्योंकि इंटरनल फैक्टर में भी एक्सप्लॉयटेशन है कि वो जो metropolis satellite relation है, that is not between two different countries. Within country also it is there, and that is linked with international metropolitan satellite relationship. अब जगह से surplus is extracted and passed on. थोड़ा हिस्सा अपने पास रख लेते हैं, बाकी आगे पास ऑन कर देते हैं. But what about national policies? What about cultural factors? उसकी बातें नहीं करता है. The entire argument is about international relations. तो माना international relations play a role. Dependency theory की एक बहुत बड़ी achievement ये है कि when the world was divided on the Cold War issue, Cold War तो पता है ना, between First World and Second World, American bloc and Soviet bloc, Russia led communist countries, तो उनमें Cold War चल रही थी. When the world was preoccupied with Cold War, dependency theory raised a new dimension of north-south divide. The division between exploiting rich and exploited poor. This was the new focus, north-south focus. That was, brought to the limelight by dependency theory. So it does highlight the injustice and inequality in international relations. But lot can be done by having good laws, good policies nationally, as many countries have demonstrated they could develop. Any other question? No question? All right. So tomorrow I am starting with the first topic of paper 2, different approaches to the study of Indian society. All right. And I'll repeat, please get hold of David Mandelbaum's book as early as possible and start reading it.